Yeah, I'm going to talk about that song Cousins, or that snippet Cousins by Ye, the artist formerly known as Kanye West. And before I do, I want to get a couple of things out of the way. Number one, we actually had a speaker, Reverend Ben McBride, come to my school recently for the diversity talk. And he had a line which I'm pretty interested in, and I think I'm going to use it quite often. Acknowledgement is not affirmation, okay? Seeing something, talking about it, trying to understand it, acknowledging, seeing what it is not in and of itself support. Okay, and then the second thing comes. Speaking of reverence, my dad was a preacher before I was born, but I didn't grow up in a very religious household. But the one thing I know is the main thing that religion brings anybody, and that this is basically any religion, is the value of compassion. And that's like the thing that we need the most right now in our civilization. Like that's the thing that we are most at peril of losing. That's how fascism wins. That's how evil wins, is when people stop suffering with other people, when people start othering other people, when people just start kicking backs in and dogpiling and dehumanizing. That's what happens. So I just want to keep those couple things in mind, because I wasn't going to talk about this new song by Kanye West, because let's face it, about 20% of the time I talk about Kanye, it works out for me. The other 80% of the time, I don't know, something goes wrong. But what happened was this. I was teaching today, and I teach a class on hip hop, and I have two lessons on Kanye West music. Both of them are based on FD Signifier's videos. And in the first one, I was getting to that song Through the Wire, and I realized at some point there's going to be a biopic, maybe a mini series about the life of Kanye West, this great, amazing artist, this truly tragic figure. Tragedy doesn't just mean something sad. Tragedy, in its real definition, refers to people of high standing, very powerful people falling. Okay? It is truly a tragedy. Kanye West is a tragedy. Okay, a true tragedy. So the biopic itself seems to like write itself, and this whole story and the fall from grace and the losing the battles with mental health and all that. But then beyond that, like when you actually study his life, it's like at times you have to say, who wrote this script? Like there are these themes that pop up in his life which make him larger than life, which make him probably very unhappy. But let's just take the simple example of his teeth. Before I get to his cousins, let's just talk about his teeth. His first hit was about his teeth, was about being in a car accident, was Through the Wire, was the song that he recorded while sipping on scissorp, as in maple syrup, being in the hospital, recorded in 2002, released 1 year later. Through the Wire is a song about having his jaw wired shut after a car accident. And like that's not enough. Obviously that was a foundational element, that was a foundational moment in his career. But then, like 2010, he goes on the Ellen DeGeneres show and shows off his teeth with what he said was a permanent set of diamond and gold grills. He insisted that they were not removable. I'm not sure that was entirely true. But let's go all the way to 2024, where he now has titanium grills permanently affixed so that you can barely hear what he's saying. They are like not, he didn't replace his teeth, but they are permanently affixed to his teeth. Like, who is writing this script? $850,000 he spent. And then at the same time, if we are to believe a very, very unbelievable source of Milo Yiannopoulos, that he is addicted to nitrous, which is actually somewhat confirmed by this song. That is actually a drug which has the real possibility to do damage that no amount of therapy, no amount of rehabilitation can fix. Nitrous is a very dangerous drug that just wipes your brain out, right? The high comes from how quickly you're losing brain cells, right? There's a real chance that this corrupt dentist who's giving him nitrous or whatever, that might be the final cause. That might be the thing that pushes him way beyond the edge, way beyond, even if there was some kind of psychological or spiritual or redemption possible, it might be too late because of the drug that was prescribed to him and abused, given to him by his doctor that was for his dental surgery. Do you see what I'm saying? He's a larger-than-life person. And this story, we are in the fourth act of the tragedy, okay? The fourth act is often the height of action. Okay, I don't think we're in the fifth act yet. Okay, the fifth act is, the denouement where everything gets kind of finished and wrapped up. We're still sort of in the fall. Let's think about this other theme that's brought up by this song, Cousins. Yeah, it's a story about children being engaged in sexual activities with each other, homosexual activities, incestuous activities, but it's also a story about pornography. And I think if we're going to be doing this Kanye biopic, pornography, much like teeth, is this weird theme that's going to keep on coming back. How does pornography fit into this whole story? And his homophobia and his sex addiction. And most of all, his shame. Is Kanye West addicted to shame? Is the shame that he felt as a kid like so ingrained in him that he needs to constantly behave in ways that causes him to feel shame, to be called a jackass by the president? You know? Like, I don't know. So listen, in this analysis of the song and the lyrics, I am not going to be uncharitable. Okay? Now, he deserves all the smoke, all the recrimination. He deserves to have lost his platform. I really hope he loses all of his money. I hope he loses every single cent. And he's reduced to a point where he has to listen to people around him, and those people care for him and help him get better. All right? That's what I hope. But until then, no. Okay? But that said, he still deserves empathy. He still deserves compassion as a human being. He still does. And I am going to try to understand him a little bit. And instead of kind of knee-jerk hate, you know? So if you want other people proudly declaring that they don't care about this or that they don't believe it, you can go somewhere else. Okay? There's lots of people all over the internet laughing at this, just yucking it up, all right? That's not what I'm interested in. Because this is a moment now, okay? The other reason that I feel compelled to do this is I did that video on the YG song where he talks about being raped by a woman. And the thing that I talked about then is a thing which I talk about in my class incessantly. It's important to understand the development of rap music, the development of hip hop, and the expanding emotional vocabulary. That as hip hop grows, what artists are able to say, the truths they're able to say about their interior life are expanding, ever expanding, from a very limited emotional range, okay? I'm the king of rock, there is none higher, suck MCs, call me sire, okay? There's no emotional range in that. I love the song, but there's no emotional range in that, okay? It's starting to be expanded. So I think this song was prompted by the YG song. I think it was prompted by that. I think he heard, oh, we can talk about SA, which stands for actual, say, assault A, okay? But instead, he tells his story, which is a story of COCSA, child-on-child sexual abuse. I guess I'm demonetized now. I don't know how these things work. I don't really care. I'm not really trying to make money off this. Now, the song itself, I don't really need to get into. I like it. I think it's good. If the whole album's like this, I'm psyched. Kind of punky with some bass and singing over it. He's like struggling to hit the notes with autotune. How do you struggle to hit notes with autotune? I don't know. But as far as I'm concerned, this is an interesting sounding song. It sounds different than the rest of his stuff. It could end up being good. Who knows? It'll probably just disappear and never be on any album again. Okay? But let's really focus on what the song is about. And even more than the lyrics, I think the tweet that goes on to describe it is the most telling. Okay? I quote him. The song is called Cousins, about my cousin that's locked in jail in life for killing a pregnant lady a few years after I told him we wouldn't, quote, look at dirty magazines together anymore. Perhaps in my self-centered mess, I felt it was my fault that I showed him those dirty magazines when he was 6, and then we acted out what we saw. My dad had Playboy magazines, but the magazines I found in the top of my mom's closet were different. My name is Ye, and I sucked my cousin's dick till I was 14, tweet sent. Okay? So, again, if you want to find people just thinking this is all BS, go somewhere else. I believe this. I believe this entirely. Okay? There's so much in this, which we're going to get into. Clearly the guilt, the shame he feels for this, the freedom that he's getting from expressing, from freeing himself from the shame of talking about it, and then also the guilt he feels where he very clearly sees a clear line from the murder of this woman and the incarceration of his cousin to this event, okay? And the connection that he draws to pornography, that pornography is actually at the source of this problem. In order to talk about this, I'm not an expert on COCSA, okay? Child-on-child sexual abuse, okay? I'm not an expert on that. There is a YouTuber, who's a licensed family therapist, Katie Morton. I'll include a link to that in the description. I watched her video. That's where I'm getting this information. I'm going to be sharing stuff from her. She's got like 1 million subscribers, so she must be right. No, everything she's saying makes sense here. Okay. And the thing is, as I talk about this, I want this to be in the similar series as my YG video, because part of why that was so personal to me is, I was also the victim of sexual abuse from a woman. Okay, like I do have experience with that. And so him expressing that was very meaningful in a sort of sociological, wow, isn't this fascinating way, which of course it is, but also in a personal way, because it's like, hey, thank you, you know? Strong men also cry, YG, thank you. You know what I'm saying? And now that I think about it, this song has made me think about all of the COCSA and non-COCSA that I experienced. Because that's the whole thing. This is a very complicated question because we're talking about 2 children. Is there an abuser? Can there be abuse without an abuser? If you watch this video by Katie Morton, she'll explain how, there is such a thing as normal sexual exploration. Okay? Take, for instance, this kid who I'll just call, I have to come up with a code name for him. Let's call him Breaker Breaker. Breaker, like, I didn't understand anything. He just kept on telling me to pretend I was with a naked girl, pretend to look at, he told me, pretend you're looking at Playboy, pretend you're in a spaceship with a naked girl, what would you do? And I remember I said, I'd open up the airlock, because, like, I wasn't interested, And so that's interesting, because Katie Morton will tell you that knowing about sex does give power, and so that's sometimes a mechanism, but okay. Let's think of another example. Someone who I will slightly translate their name to Johnny Hatchet. It sounds like a gay porn name, but let's just say it was his name, I was over at his house. We were looking at coin collection. His dad had a coin collection. I don't know. We were looking at it, and then we were like, hey, what if we touched each other's ding-dongs? And that's what we did. And that, I'm not traumatized. Nothing really happened. That's just what happened, okay? I don't know what happened to him. He moved back to Europe. And I just like, well, okay, now we've done that. But then 2 years later, I had an instance that was SA, okay? Somebody who I will codename White Tyson, because he was a very muscular, short guy with a cleft palate and a very heavy lisp who I was friends with. And I stopped being friends with him because he kept on cornering me and, like, grabbing me. Just that's all you can say. Now, honestly, obviously, he was a victim himself, right? That's very clear. I wasn't, like, super traumatized because I was able to get away. I was a pretty big kid myself, so it was definitely not okay what was happening. But at the same time, that left me with confusion and guilt. That was something that stayed with me. That was something that made me feel bad, because I didn't let it happen, but it happened twice. So if it happened twice, that meant I allowed it to happen the second time, right? So that's the line. Where is it? Consensual playing, and, like, when is it, like, not okay? As a final story, this is maybe the most amusing. My friends and I, we didn't have girlfriends in high school. We might have been incels if such a thing existed, but we just had no luck with the ladies. So one time we were sitting around playing video games. I think it might have been Mario Kart, maybe Mortal Kombat 2. I don't remember which one of us said it, but one of my friends, like 5 dudes, were all sitting there. I think we were at Toad's house, and I think it was Donkey Kong. It was either Donkey Kong or Princess Peach. But one of my friends who's a dude, let's say it's Donkey Kong, just goes, "Hey, what if we gave each other oral sex?" And we're all like, "You're joking, right?" He's like, "Yeah, I was joking." Anyways, I hadn't thought of that until this song, so we didn't do anything. We just went back to playing more Mario Kart. But we probably thought about it a lot more. Like, hey, what if we just did this? But that's the question, When is it safe and nice, and when is it not? Now, the metaphor that she comes up with is a kid can shoot a kid with a gun. That doesn't mean they should go to jail forever, but that's still murder. And the other thing is, even if this is a completely consensual, if there's no power dynamic, if there's no age difference, even that, there doesn't have to be abuse to have trauma, right? There can just be trauma without it. And it's very clear that the trauma itself is in this sexual act. And the fact that he allows the correlation of his cousin going to jail Okay? Correlation, not causation. If you ever have a friend who's superstitious, teach them correlation, not causation. They're not the same things. Okay? So what do you learn when you actually study COCSA? The main thing is talking about it helps. That's like the most important thing you can do. You have to talk about it. Okay? Emotions, it's like the game of whack-a-mole. You know, you can't push them down because they're just going to pop up somewhere else. It doesn't matter. I had to talk about White Tyson. I talked about him in high school with those same friends of mine. When I hope they don't mind me telling that story. We didn't do anything. It was just a funny conversation. And we all laughed like we didn't take it seriously. And maybe I was the only person who was actually thinking about it. I don't know. It was funny. Um, Anyways, I told them about White Tyson, and they just thought it was hilarious. Like they didn't check in on me. They didn't make sure I was okay, but at least I had an outlet. I was able to get it out, and I've talked about it with every partner I've been since then. It's just a thing that happened. I went to therapy, and it's okay. But can you imagine what I would be like if it went further? If me and White Tyson had a relationship for years? You know? What happens is, and this is what psychologists will tell you, it leads to bad things. It leads often to hypersexuality because you try to take back the power by acting out sexually. So that might lead to promiscuity. That might lead to abominations, like that song with Lil Pump, okay? It might also lead to PTSD. It might even lead to borderline personality disorder. Now, the one thing I love is that Katie Morton never stops insisting that everybody is responsible for the pain they cause. We are all responsible for our actions, especially those that hurt other human beings. And that's why you have to say acknowledgement is not affirmation. It doesn't really matter. Things can be explained but not excused. Kanye has done things in the past few years that can be explained but not excused by this. But still, perhaps, if his brain isn't too fried by nitrous, this might actually be the path back, because there is a fair chance that if he is actually honest with himself, he might recover enough to be a well human being if he goes to a lot of therapy and keeps taking his medication and figures out ways to make amends. I mean, I don't think these things are going to happen, but that's the hope. So going back to my movie, like, let's think about this movie. How would you film this movie? Well, now there's a whole extra scene, isn't there? There's a whole extra scene of him with his cousin in that room. And the thing is, he's talked about his dad's Playboys all the time. As we'll see, he's blamed Playboys for so many things. But then there's actually hardcore gay pornography that he's looking at in his mom's room. Whew, you know, this is very confusing stuff. This is very shame-inducing stuff. The kind of shame, you know, it's not a coincidence that like most very unwell people, often it starts with some sense of deep, deep shame, some kind of forgiveness they cannot get because they cannot give it to themselves. So if we just take this as the beginning incident with pornography, and we have the Playboy at his dad's house, and then I don't know what. I don't even know what gay pornography in 1983 would be called, okay? And then 2005, you know, he describes his life as such: Louis Vuitton, porn, and church. He described it as saying he looks at a lot of porn, he then goes to church to try to pray away the sin, and then he puts on some Louis Vuitton and leaves. I mean, that's like this moralizing that he has. It's always this distinction between good and porn, that porn represents to him all that is evil, because if we're taking him seriously and we're listening to this song, that's all that's evil within himself because of this relationship that he feels he instigated, and he feels led to his cousin murdering somebody, and he feels led his cousin to spend the rest of his life in jail. That's enough to make you not well, okay? It really is. 2013, apparently, when recording, 2008, apparently when recording with Daft Punk, there's a story, I don't know if it's apocryphal, that he watched so much pornography in the studio with Daft Punk that one of them started hallucinating. Okay, so he'd be surrounded by pornography, constantly ingesting it. 2018, he becomes the creative director of the inaugural Pornhub Awards. I remember seeing him on Jimmy Kimmel describing what kind of pornography he looks at. That's the year that I Love It by Lil Pump comes out. And then church. Okay? Then church. Then church. Then Jesus is King. He goes as far out as he can into pornography, and his immediate reaction after doing that, after designing the Pornhub Award trophy, which he did, after that, he then says Jesus is King and says that Jesus is what stopped him from his porn addiction. Okay? This is what he said on the Zane Lowe interview. Playboy is my gateway into full-blown pornography addiction. We now know that's not completely true. My dad had a Playboy left out at age 5, and it's affected almost every choice I made for the rest of my life. From age 5 to now, to kick the habit, and it just presents itself in the open, it's like, okay, and I stand up and say, it's not okay. He just back and forth. The battle of good and evil in his public statements appears to be between Jesus and pornography, not between good and bad. 2022, he declared Hollywood is a giant brothel. Pornography destroyed my family. So he blames the breakup of his family on pornography. Meanwhile, that very same year, during the famous incident with the people at Adidas and the anti-Semitic moments that are just about to come, he is showing pornography unasked to people at Adidas. And it turns out he actually forces people to look at pornography in his workplace, according to reports, allegedly. You understand? This is why therapy is no joke. This is why mental health is no joke. Let's imagine that he was capable of saying what actually happened to him when he was 6 until 14. Because the thing is, if it continues over 8 years, that means that he feels really guilty about it. Really guilty, like he must have really wanted it. Okay? Like, you don't let yourself off the hook. Okay? I could let myself off the hook for White Tyson. Okay? I could. But if it went on for 8 years, and I thought it was evil, and I thought what I was doing was wrong, and it was incestuous on top of all that, I don't know how I'd possibly forgive myself. And so he's using that same thing that he blames on people to inflict on people who do not want to see it. He actually, showing people pornography unasked for is a form of sexual abuse. So he literally sexually abused creative directors at Adidas with pornography. 2024, he talks about starting his own porn company, Yeezy Porn, and then on top of all this, let's just not forget what's happened, because the whole incest aspect is a bit I haven't even talked about. I'm something of a scientist myself, okay? I have researched a fair amount of online pornography throughout the years, and it's weird. It's weird as hell. It is virtually impossible to browse pornographic websites and not find a preponderance, a domination of incest-themed pornography, even if it's not something that one likes or one is looking for. What's up with that? What's going on here? What must that do to somebody who has these feelings? I looked it up. I seriously typed in, when was pornography taken over by themes of incest? There's no way this is getting monetized, And according to what people think, it was because of Game of Thrones. It was because of Cersei and the Kingslayer. What was his name? That guy who looks like Aragorn. Point is, the brother and sister thing there, apparently that's what mainstreamed it. And now it is, since 2015, it has been the most popular search term. So that's your answer, by the way. Why is incest pornography so popular? Because apparently there's some people out there that love it. And I'm not here to kink shame. I don't get it, but I don't get a lot of things people like, So what must that do to him? What must that do to him? To somebody who is harboring so much shame and guilt and fear and self-hatred around the themes of pornography and incest, that he goes on to work for a company that itself has done more to promote pornography and incest than Hugh Hefner. I don't know. I'm just saying the movie writes itself, and it's sad. And maybe this is the turn. Maybe this is a turn for the best, Because, as Katie Morgan would say, the most important thing is to talk about it. Okay? What should have happened was he or his cousin should have told their parents. Child Protective Services would come in. They wouldn't take the kids away, but they would just talk with them, help them protect themselves, get them into therapy, help them fix it, and you can live a whole happy life being totally fine and well. Okay? There are survivors of this all over the world. You're looking at one. Okay? So that's the compassion. I think he's asking for compassion, and I know he went right back to the anti-Semitic tweets and the homophobic tweets, and there's no justifying any of the things he's saying. There is no justifying pain that you inflict on other people, okay? That doesn't mean we can't learn something by trying to be compassionate. And the rest of the song just falls apart. I don't know. It's interesting because he tries to link it to self-medicating. He ties it to the nitrous, and it seems like he's almost having a cohesive thought about like self-medicating and like people thinking that he's gay, but it's like he's obviously talking about himself, and it's like, would he be okay with himself if he wasn't 100% heterosexual? Like, would that be acceptable to him? Is that the problem? I don't know. A little bit late to say this, but I'm not a psychologist. I don't pretend to be one. I'm just someone who really cares about Kanye West and his artistic output. So there you go. There's my thoughts on it. I told my wife this would only be 15 to 20 minutes, but what are you going to do? I wanted to treat this with nuance and care. So then, there's the camera.